This is an opportunity for us to get to know each other a bit better. I want you to tell me what are your 2 or 3 or 5 favorite words in the comments below. I'm going to tell you mine in this video. Let's start with one, friendship. I want to start with friendship because I think that the most special and magical kinds of friendships are relationships to which we sometimes lack language in our culture. We can explain to ourselves or even to our employer, if we need to justify absence of work, why it's so important that we attend to an issue that's arisen with our brother or sister or husband or wife or partner or child or parent. But sometimes it's harder for us to explain that if something is going on with a friend. I've been through this. I think many people have. My closest friend died about 10 years ago. I'm still very close to him. I talk with him every day. I laugh with him every day. And after he died, it was difficult to convey why that was such a life-altering event for me, why I had to suddenly spend a lot of time in a different country, change my commitments and so on. So we sometimes can run out of steam when we need to explain the magic of the most rare and beautiful kinds of friendships. And in the end, these relationships can be as precious and as magical as any other kind of relationship we might have. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. My second word is simple, superficiality. And I want to include superficiality because if you try to aim for a world without superficiality, you'd certainly end up with a world without me. But I think you might end up with a world without you as well, because I think a world without superficiality would be a world without human beings. And so there is something misanthropic about wanting to get rid of superficiality. My third word is truthfulness. And I say truthfulness instead of truth because truth is about getting a particular thing right. But truthfulness is about an approach to pursuing the truth, an approach to getting things right. It's about trying to be accurate. It's about trying to be self-aware. It's about trying to be sincere. It's about not falling for all kinds of bogus shit. It's about being in an adequate relationship with making sense, with eyes wide open of the world around you. It's an important philosophical value, and a more important philosophical value than truth, incidentally, because a lot of the greatest philosophy ever written doesn't actually tell you the truth. It often gets things wrong, but it gets things wrong in a deep way, because there are the errors that philosophy can make, which would be just the errors confined to the ivory tower, but there are also the errors philosophy can make that are intensifications of errors out there in the culture, the errors in your head and in my head. And if philosophy mirrors them and systematizes them or intensifies them, it's not doing nothing. It's not doing something useless. It's in fact getting something deeply wrong, but in doing so, it shows us something about ourselves, who we are, where we've come from, and so on. My next word is history, and it's history for many reasons, but here is one. I'm interested as a philosopher in ethical values, which means being interested in how they came about. Some of them may have come about quite recently, like the value of authenticity, for example. Probably came about in the last 300 years. Now, there is also a situation where some values arose before we have any historical account of anything. And here you might use a different word. You might use the word genealogy, which is a kind of reconstruction of how something may have happened before we have an historical account of it. But it's still part of an historical sense. It's still part of trying to figure out where we have come from, who we are, where we're going. And so history is something that is, for me, a very close partner of moral philosophy. You basically can't do moral philosophy without doing history, in my view. And so it's a word I can't live without. I think it's time to put in 2 musical words. And the first is rhythm. And rhythm comes in different shapes and sizes. I mean, there is metronomic rhythm, a sort of strict rhythm that you get in some classical music, but you get it a lot more in jazz. There is also kind of free-flowing improvisatory rhythm, but there is also a kind of rhythm that's a psychological rhythm, and we talk about it a lot in classical music, and that's a rhythm that creates a tension and a sense of a musical line infused with energy between one note and another. And so this tension goes between one note and another, and between all the notes, and indeed across the whole piece. It's a very difficult value to realize if you're a musician. For example, I only think 4 pianists in the history of recorded sound actually showed the highest level of rhythmical strength. We talk about these 4 a little bit on this channel. We're going to talk about them a lot more. But rhythm and rhythmical strength or rhythmic control is an absolutely central value in my life. It's probably as important a value as any. The sister musical value to rhythm that I want to mention is transitions. And that just means how A is connected to B in a musical performance. And the greatest masters of transitions made them imperceptible, such that there is no sense of this bit being connected to that bit by sellotape, but there is a very organic connection between the two, which makes this and that part of a single whole delivered to us on a single musical breath. My next word is surrealism. And I don't mean that because there is so much great surrealist art. In fact, there's a problem with surrealist art. Painting has struggled to be an adequate expression of surrealism. Arguably the greatest work of surrealist art is a film by Bunuel called The Phantom of Liberty. But I pick out surrealism not just because it's an important artistic movement, but because it says something about what's the regular state of our minds as humans who live in a certain historical moment. Surrealism mirrors back to us a certain kind of psychological situation that is particular to our age. And that's why I'm a very big defender of surrealist values, even though I'm sure that's a contradiction in terms. Authenticity. I mean, authenticity is easy and obvious. I think it's the most important value in our culture. I think that everybody cares probably more about becoming who they are than about anything else in this culture. At least that's the argument that I'm going to make in one of my future videos on this channel. And so I can't but include the word authenticity. My last word is love. There is, of course, the love for objects that are works of art or pieces of music or works of literature or books in philosophy. And the sentiment I always have about that kind of love is that when we relate to each other about things we love, it's really important to try to understand what it's like for somebody else to love the thing that they love before you knock it. Now, I think you can understand what it means to love something, and once you do, then you have the rights to knock it. But you don't have the right to knock it unless you know what it's like to love it. I'm stealing this formulation from the great music writer Charles Rosen, who said that you've got to know what it means to love a certain musical composition before you criticize somebody's relationship with it. And then there is a second sense of love, which is love in your personal life, love for the people in your life you love the most, your partner, your family, your children. There's a lot of magic to that, but I'm not sure that I can use any language about it that's adequate. So I'm going to thank you for watching and ask you to tell me your favorite words below, and see you next time.